So today we're going to be talking about writing books. I talk a lot about content marketing and why that's so important in our profession. I often teach people how to write ebooks, but today is more about books. So I have a question for you. If you've written a book, or perhaps even an ebook, let me know in the comments, what's the title? What have you called it? What's it about if you have written an ebook? And if you haven't written an ebook, I'd just be curious to know what's the number one reason? What's the reason why you are interested in writing a book? So let me know the number one reason, and also let me know what's your biggest challenge with the idea of writing a book. What's the thing that stops you doing it? And as I'll explain again in a little while when we start, I've written several books, so I know the challenges of writing books. So let me know what's your biggest challenge. Right, who else have we got here? We've got quite a few people who haven't commented yet, but we do have. Jim did say there's no rain in Exeter, which is great. I'm pleased for you, Jim. And by the way, Jim, I love the look of that new tool that you're creating for my Academy members. Okay, there's a little teaser for those who are in the Academy, wondering what that is. Linda, what does Linda say? Okay, so Linda, I'm assuming this is one that you have written, how to have the dreaded conversation with your IT team, because Linda works with, she's in the IT industry. Okay, great book. Well done. Congratulations for doing that. I think we are about to start. I make it about 5 seconds until we get on the hour. We always start promptly. So let's do that. Welcome to everybody. This is a session that's going to be really fascinating on how to write a book. These sessions, if you're brand new, if you've never been to one of these sessions before, by the way, just put new in the comments. I can give you a special shout out. So just put new if you've never been to one of my live streams before. So far, they're all familiar names that I can see. And if you are new, just so you know, these sessions are exactly 60 minutes. We finish on the hour. But throughout, you can ask questions. Myself and my guest, who I'll introduce very soon, we will answer questions during the session. So please ask questions. But when you ask a question, and perhaps Sarah will help me out, just put in front of the question, put two capital Qs, because sometimes the chat box goes crazy with comments, which is awesome. Please comment away, but it'll help me see the questions. So just put those two capital Qs in front, just so I can spot when it's a question rather than a comment. That way, we'll make sure we answer it. We will answer as many questions as we can in the 60 minutes. But don't leave, if you've got a burning question, don't leave it until 3 minutes to go, because you might miss out. We finish as a hard stop on the hour. So anyway, this is what you want to do for a question. Put QQ in front, just like Sarah has said there. Then I will spot it as a question. I can see that David is here. Hi there, David. It says James Brown, but I know that it's David from. I think it's David from Murfreesboro, if I've got the right one. So please ask questions. A couple of quick things before we start. As you know, one of the things that we do is we want to help make the world a better place. So every month we have a particular project that we support. And as a thank you for being here live, for every person live, and we'll get the numbers. You may be on Facebook right now, you might be on LinkedIn, you might be on YouTube. We'll get the report with the numbers of people who are live, and we make a contribution on your behalf to a project. Our chosen project for this month is to help poor families, underprivileged children in northern Kenya, where malnutrition very often leads to blindness. So a thank you for being here. You will be providing a daily vitamin dose to children in Kenya to help prevent child blindness. So thank you for showing up live, as always. Also, if you haven't been to my last couple of live streams, I mentioned, and interested today is all about writing a book. I also write lots of ebooks, and my latest ebook that I've written is how to price cleanup work. And it looks a bit like this. It's 28 pages. I wrote it last year. And if you would like a completely free copy of that ebook, if you haven't had it already, then Sarah's going to put a link into the comments. It might take a little while for it to come through. She's got to do it in Facebook, in LinkedIn, she's got to do it in YouTube. But she'll put a link in the comments as to where you can grab your free copy of my latest ebook, all about pricing cleanup work. And last but not least, we are running in a few weeks' time, 3 weeks' time. February the 21st through to the 23rd, we're running the Profitable Bookkeeping Conference, 3 days, where I'll be teaching how to value price bookkeeping services. We have some amazing guest speakers as well. And the great news is tickets are free at the moment. So make sure you've grabbed your free ticket. Again, Sarah will put a link into the comments. So if you haven't got your ticket already, then you can go and grab that. Okay, so let me just see if there's any questions coming already or any comments. Happy Tuesday to you as well, Deborah from Glenville. Good to see. NY, that's New York, isn't it? Hi. I'm not sure who R is. It could be Robert, it could be Reginald, I don't know. But anyway, hi to you. Great to see you here. Neil's here. Hi there, Neil Criddle. Great to see you on the session. Right, our guest speaker today is Sharon Critchlow, and Sharon is an accountant that she teaches and helps people to write books. So I'm really looking forward to learning myself. I've written a number of books. Some of you know I've written a number of, up here is I think I've written 4 or 5 self-published ones. My latest book was published, so I'm going to be interested to find out Sharon's views on the difference between self-publishing and publishing and which might be the better route. So with that said, let me bring on Sharon. Hi there, Sharon.
Hello there.
Hi there. How's things?
Oh, things are great here. And I see you've got a few people from the Southwest, which is amazing because that's where I am.
Oh, right. Okay. Whereabouts in the Southwest?
So I'm on the North Devon coast in the UK.
Okay. So you're not too far away from Neil. You're not too far away from Jim.
Exactly.
Yeah. My geography of the UK is not too bad, even though I've not been there for a while. So yeah, it's great to have you on, Sharon, and sharing your insights in how to write books. But before we get into that, perhaps you just share a little bit of your background with us.
Yes, certainly. So I'm an accountant. I'm an accountant with ACCA. I qualified actually in Devon in 1996, and I started in public practice. I then moved into corporate, into financial services, where I grew a business for 17 years. And about 7 years ago, I decided on a bit of a lifestyle change. So I was able to sell my shares in my business. And I thought, well, I'm just going to see what happens next. I've never not had a plan. But this time I didn't have a plan. And basically, I ended up as a non-executive director of a couple of different businesses. I've ended up on the council at ACCA now for the last 6 years, which has meant that I've also helped with governance creation at ACCA as well. And I currently sit on the remuneration committee. But in addition to that, I also do leadership courses. And one of the things that had come out of some of the mentoring that we were doing is my business partner has written a lot of books. She's self-published a lot of books. And she said, actually just before the pandemic hit, she said, would we like to write a book sort of together, get lots of people together to share stories around mental health in particular? And this was part of what we call our social passion project. So we thought, yeah, I could do that. We could get some people to share their stories. And so the Bounce Back Journey came out, and we kind of self-published it. But I noticed what Nikki was doing, and a number of people who wrote in that book said, could you do this for us as well? And now Nikki's done about 11 books by that stage. And she said, yeah, okay, I think we can do that. So the publishing arm of the business really took off. And during all the lockdowns, when people were furloughed and whatever, there was a lot more people coming to us and going, oh, could you do this for our book as well? And so that's basically where it all sprung from. But to say as a group, because we now have a number of people that help us with all of this, we've been doing this for quite a few years. So that's the potted history of how come I've ended up with a publishing business.
Okay, that's an interesting journey you've been on.
It is.
So let's. I mean, we've got lots of things we can talk about with writing books. The first thing I guess to think about is things have changed a lot over the years, and
Mm.
it's got. I think it's easier than ever before to write a book, and it's something that certainly I think all accountants, all accounting professionals should write a book, or at least an ebook, but even a full blown book. So I'm going to ask you a bit about publishing versus self publishing, but before we do that, just in a nutshell, what would be the main reason or reasons why people listening today should be thinking about writing a book?
So this is all about positioning yourself. Now, the world out there, it's a very busy place. So how do you differentiate what you do, particularly if it's bookkeeping services, accountancy services? How do you differentiate what you do, get across your personality, your skill sets? Maybe there's industries that you know a lot about. In the West Country, there's a lot of people down here who know about farming, and that's a whole genre on its own. So this is a way of actually separating yourself from other people. It's a way of giving yourself an amazing piece of marketing collateral that once you've made the investment, time and a bit of money to actually get it out there, you will have forever. And you can put it in some very public places to keep being seen. So it's a way of setting yourself up, if you like, as a thought leader.
Absolutely. So I call it expert positioning, but I agree with that. In fact, my friend Steve Pipe used to describe your book as the best business card you could possibly have, and
Absolutely.
there's a huge amount of sense with that, because I think about my first book that I wrote was in 2010. I'd been teaching accountants for 10 years in the UK, but not many people outside of the network we had really heard of me. I wasn't being asked to speak on the main stage. And then I wrote my book in 2010. It was published in May 2011, Effective Pricing for Accountants. And wow, did that make a difference? Suddenly people were reaching out to me and saying, Mark, can you run a webinar? Can you come and speak at a conference, speak at an event? And that opened up so many doors. So I agree with everything you've said. Now, my first book, I've done both self-publishing and publishing. And I think the first thing that probably people need to think about if they're thinking about writing a book, which I'm hoping is most people here, is what's the difference between the two, and what's the best route to go down?
Well, I suppose it all depends on who you are and who your contacts are and all of that sort of thing. So what I would say is, so the difference is, so you want to go to Hodders or Penguin or something like that. You want to get published by a mainstream publisher, which until probably 10, 15 years ago was the only way. You know, you could either, if you wanted to actually get a sensible name and a reasonable distribution, then that was the only route. So your only route at that time was to get yourself an agent who would then go around and basically flog your manuscript to whoever would take it. Now, because that was the times at the time, then obviously the industry was a lot bigger on the traditional side, and yeah, maybe somebody would look at it, maybe somebody would like the look of it. We've all heard of some of the most popular books now, sort of that basically didn't get through a lot of publishers' things. Different publishers specialize in different things. So if you've got a Christian-based book, then there are certain publishers that only really publish those sorts of things. If you've got a historical book, then there's publishers that only publish those sorts of things. So you've got to pick your publishers. If you go down the traditional route, you've got to really be prepared to either get an agent or put together a really good pitch, because what you're asking these people to do is to invest in your book. So you're going to have to either write at least half of it, if not all of it, show them what you're good at. You've said that you've already self-published, and now a publisher is saying, we'll take the risk. Because this is it. This is a business proposition from their perspective. They need to be able to take a risk on you. So you need to be able to show them that this book can sell and that people will be interested. So you need to know who your market is. And I would say whichever route you go down, you need to know who your market are. What are you expecting people to do with this book? So what I would say is, if you go down the traditional route, be prepared for quite a lot of rejections. So it's a bit like, going for job interviews. Be prepared for a lot of rejections, or get yourself an agent. And particularly if you've got a track record, if you've already done some stuff, that's very visible, then that does make it a lot easier for people to go, yeah, of course. And of course, if you're famous. So, if you're incredibly famous, then to be fair, you could probably just go to any publisher and they'll just publish. So they've got to be able to make sure they can make their money back, because obviously these things, whether it's typesetting and designing your cover and all the rest, it all needs effort. So your traditional route is that. Now, in the past, your traditional route has a lot more help, I would say, when it came to actually getting your book out there. And to be fair, they do have a number of, depending on the size of the publisher, they will have a number of different opportunities, if you like, to get your book in front of different audiences. Then maybe they've got arrangements with certain books, chains of bookstores or whatever. So that's another thing to ask if you go down the traditional route. What are you going to do with this book when you've got it? Because I do hear quite a lot of people who sign up for these things because you don't make quite so much money going down that route, because obviously they want their cut. But if you go down that route, you just need to be aware. So what are you giving up? What are you going to get back for it? And how are they going to help you? So then when you go to the other extreme, so the other extreme is to self-publish. Now, there's a number of different opportunities on that. So Amazon do one called KDP, so Kindle Direct Publishing. It's a little bit of a dark art. It's one that we're very good at, but it's a little bit of a dark art. So when your book cover doesn't fit and everything else, and you're tearing your hair out, you've got that route. There's another company you might want to look up, which is Ingram Spark, and they do it slightly differently. So you've got those things, and basically you've got to produce your manuscript, produce your cover, and set it up on the system yourself. And again, these options actually in the self-publishing and in where I am, which is the hybrid space, which is kind of in between, it does give you a lot of opportunities to not end up with a garage full of books. Because if you go to, you could just produce a manuscript, go to a local printers, get them to print 1,000 books. But if you can't sell them, you've then got to store them. So the good thing with going through things like Amazon is that they will do what they call print on demand. So people will, they'll put an order in, and then the book is made to order, in effect. So it does stop you from having that, having to make that investment as well. So I'd say there's two different routes, and it all rather depends how confident you are with technology, how, if you like, whether you actually, if you don't want to get involved with any of that, and you just want to write the book and get it done, and you want somebody else to help you. So you can either go down the traditional route or the hybrid route, which is where I sit, where basically we set it up for you. And we've got copywriters and designers and everything else. We can typeset it for you. We can edit it for you. We can do all of those other things. But in the end of the day, it's your book to sell. But we will help you to get it out there. So so it all depends. But this market is very different now to where it was 10 years ago. So I don't know what you think, Mark.
Yeah, well, you said a lot of things there that are really interesting, and thinking about my experiences of having been down both routes, and I think that perhaps even another question for people to ask themselves before they even think about, is it publish or self-publish, is what's their goal, what's the purpose, what's the reason for writing a book? Because it could be one of two things. It could be either to make money, or it could be to position yourself as the expert. And I have always suggested to people that unless you happen to write a great bestseller and have a great publisher, and you want to become a full-time author, making money should not be the reason for doing it. If you're an accounting professional, the reason for doing it is because you want to position yourself as the expert. As I said earlier, my friend Steve Pipe said it's the best business card you could possibly have, and perhaps we'll talk more about that in a short while. And so, having gone down, for me, my reason for writing the book was the latter, because I was a nobody until I wrote my first book. It opened up doors. It never has been to make money. And so my personal experience is the self-publishing route has been the better route. I found working with a publisher challenging because they want to exert some control over the writing style, for example, which didn't fit in with the way that I did do things. But I think the other thing you said towards the end, which I think is really important is when you self-publish, and you said with your hybrid route, it's your book. If you use it, if you want to use it for content marketing to position yourself as the expert, then having control over the book means you can use that book in creative ways, like, for example, giving away free copies as part of a lead generation system, or using. I mean, I've created audio versions of my book, just read it out and made that available. You've got control over what you can do, whereas when it's published, you haven't got the same level of control. I don't know if that makes sense to you, if you agree with that.
Yeah, I'd absolutely agree. And this, as I say, a lot of it comes down to what's your market and why you're doing it. But definitely, I would say that you've got a lot more flexibility if you go down either the hybrid or the self-publishing route. Certainly.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about if the goal is to position ourselves as the expert, to help us grow our personal brand, win more business. Have you got any specific examples of how professionals have been using their books in a way that supports their business?
Oh, absolutely. And of course, people do it in different ways. So, like you were saying about do you give your book away? And people might be thinking, why would I do this and give it away? Well, you see, now this is the first thing I would say when you write your book is don't sell the family silver. They've got to read it and have enough confidence that you are really good at what you do, but know that they can't do it without you. So one of the things that our editing team does when we get business books is go, could that go as a link on your website? I think we should take that bit out and stop the story there, because then they've got to come to you for the rest. They get value, but they don't get everything from you. So that it becomes that, yeah, I trust this person. I've had some value. Now I want to take the next step. Let's sign up on the website. Let's go and have a look at the downloads they've given me. Yeah, I need to talk to this person. So if you're using it as a lead generator, then just be aware that that's one way of doing it. Another way, as you say, is book as a business card, which is amazing. I'm going to wave a book here, just to give you a size idea, right? So this is 5 inches by 7 inches. It's about 10,000 words. It costs about, if you do it down the Amazon route, it will cost about £3 to in sterling to produce. So it's not as daft as it sounds when you say give it away. And it's 10,000 words, so it's not a huge book to be able to write either. So if you want to do something that says, this is me, and it positions you, then that's a good way of doing it. So that's a good way of attracting attention, particularly if you're trying to get into big corporates. Another one that we've had is a lady who's done a sales book, and she's done it as a textbook. So you can download it, you can buy it online, absolutely, but she uses it as an upsell. So when she goes in and teaches what she teaches, she automatically includes the price of £12.99 for every single person who's going to be on there, because they're all going to need her book. So she's been adding, hundreds and hundreds of pounds to her bottom line, just because she's just been saying, well, you will need this for, because I'll be referring to it. So when people take her on, when the big corporates take her on, they're like, oh, okay, it comes with a book, brilliant, So that's another one. In fact, I've seen a few people doing it a bit like that. Another way, and in fact, I'm going to wave another book, slightly bigger book, this one. This is an accountant who did this. So this book actually was written by a guy in the UK, Iglak Hussein, and it's about how you put together a business plan. And it's got lots of nuts and bolts in there. So he's used that as a lead generator. He sold a copy of it to each of his clients, which is how he recouped all his money in the first place for creating it. But so also so that he can empower them to do some more of the stuff themselves. But what that book got him is his family originally come from northern Pakistan. He went back with a couple of copies of his book to see family members. And they said, oh, this is amazing. People from here don't do books. Because, of course, the UK, China, Japan, and the US, Canada, very popular to write books. Other places of the world, it isn't so popular. So he took this book back, and next thing he knows, he's been invited to speak at this big event of all of these judges for the region. And no non-legal person has ever spoken at this event, but he's returned as the expert. to where his family come from. So BBC Pakistan get hold of this, and next thing he knows, he's on the news being interviewed. So, so has he positioned himself as the expert? I rather think he has. so, that's how he's done it. But people do it in lots and lots of different ways. I showed you the yellow book earlier. This one. So this book managed to get the lady who wrote that, Bernie Davis, on the stage for a TEDx, amongst a number of other things. So she seems to now be the go-to person in Wales for all a manner of sort of how you put yourself out there as an entrepreneur. So you've got to decide, what is it you want the book to do for you? Is it a technical thing? Is it a promotional tool? Are you going to use it as a textbook? And get a bit creative with it. That's what I'd say. So yes, there's lots of different ways that you can do it.
Yeah, absolutely. And as you said at the outset, that the price, £3 per book when you go down there's so many great options now for print
Yeah,
on demand, and some people balk at the price and think that's expensive, but you have to think about it. Given it's a great business card to have, it positions you as the expert. It's a great tool for either winning new clients or selling, cross-selling high value services to your existing clients. Perhaps if you want to start specializing in tax planning or business advisory, for example, and you want to position yourself to your clients as experts. Just one new client.
yeah,
One new client could probably pay for a whole run of books. So to,
absolutely. And the things, people don't throw books away. They may give them away, but they don't throw them away. They throw your leaflets away. So,
yeah,
but they won't throw a book away. And in fact, my business partner had one of her very early books was up on a bookshelf in someone's house for about 8 years. And this lady who owned this book, her husband was having a look down the books and saying, "I need a speaker, an inspirational speaker for to speak at Great Ormond Street to, I think it was 200 doctors or something like that." And so he had a look down. She said, "Oh, what about this book?" And they pulled the book out and Googled her and had a look at the all the web details and whatever on it. She was still online. She was still there doing it. Contacted her, and that started a whole flurry of speaking events and a whole flurry of paid workshops and everything else. So it stays there. So that was about 8 years, that one, of sitting there, and then all of a sudden she was remembered.
yeah, wow. And another thing you said earlier, you showed, I think it was the first book, and showed the size of it, it being
Yes.
10,000 words. And it was interesting that the one that I had published, there was a requirement for me to write, I forget the exact number, but I think it was something like 70,000 words I had to write, which was, I think, double what my previous biggest published book was, and some of them are a lot less than that. And because that's one of the things that I think people, and we might get into this later, people fear and think this is such a big job. It's going to I can't write a book. It's going to take me forever to write 60, 70,000 words. But when you self-publish, you're in control. And another point that you said was about not giving away everything. And one of the things that I think is important is you've got to give some great information. You've got to give some great quality, but not everything. So a 10,000 word book, and even less than that, you can write less than 10,000 words. As long as it's great information and as long as it doesn't give them everything, then that can be really successful as a book idea.
Absolutely. And the thing is, if you do end up with a book that's, say, this size, which is, this is one of my books, and this is 10,000 words, what you can also do then is, if you think, well, actually that went quite well, you can do a second book in the series. You don't have to stick to one book. You can have another book. So if you are heading around the 50, 60,000 thing, you might want to think, well, do I want to put it all out as one book? Or is it actually two books or three books?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Because the other
And
thing is,
go on.
minimum price of, let's say there's a minimum price when you think about it for books. So most business books in the UK are roughly around the 12.99 bracket. So again, but people won't pay three times that if this book was three times the, they then think twice. Whereas anything under the £15 bracket, actually people just go, oh yeah, I'll have that. So if you think you're going to do a megaton of a book, then you might want to think, well, actually, do I make it three books? And then people will pay £12.99 for each book.
Yep, that's a great point. And another thing that being a consumer of business books, when I read business books, I much prefer reading business books where they get to the point fairly quickly and you can read it in a couple of hours. Whereas the
Yeah.
long business books that drag on, I often bail out and give up because they're just too heavy going. So sometimes writing more concisely and just giving some great information in a short number of pages is actually serving the client better as well.
Yeah, and it's the world we live in, isn't it? When you think about it, it's we're used to sound bites, we're used to social media, we're used to live streaming, we're used to getting our information in lots of different ways. If you want to do it via a book, particularly if you then turn it into an Audible book, then yeah, you want to have it as something where people look at it and go, "Oh, a couple of hours, I could get through that on a flight to
Yes,
somewhere."
absolutely. So let's dive into a little bit about the process. Where do you start with
Mm,
writing a book? I have noticed at the corner of my eye that nobody's asked a question yet, so I will at this point just remind everybody if you have a question, then get the question into the comments, and we'll get round to your question soon. My question is, so once you've got an idea for a book, where do you start with the creation process?
Well, I think the first thing you've got to do is you've got to decide who your audience is and what you want them to do next. So it's the same. I would say that writing a book's the same as having a business of any sort. So you've got to think, okay, so who's my audience for this? And how is this going to serve them? And what do I want them to do after they've read this book? Because then that will help you to actually craft. If you think, right, I want them to be able to get this far into a business plan, then come to me, or I want them to be able to understand how to do this, this, and this, and then the next 3 points is where they come and use my services. Then, if you know what your audience is, it's going to help you to do the right sort of cover to get yourself noticed. It's going to help you to have the right size book, because what's their expectations? I would argue that if you're trying to get youngsters into finance, the smaller the book, the better. You need to understand who your audience is, the same as you would with any other business. You need to understand what it is that you want to sell to them at that point, and then what it is you want to sell to them after that point. So I think that's sort of the first thing, is that planning stage of how you're going to do that. So I'd say that the next thing you've got to do is write. And most people go, "Oh, I don't know where to start." Well, some people start logically with chapters if they know their topic really well, and they go, "Right, I've got a process. I'm going to write about my process. The process is this." Cool. If you don't, and you think, "I want to write a book about this, I don't really know how it's going to come out," then just start writing, because I cannot edit an empty page. I can only edit it once you've started writing it. So start writing and then see what it develops into. Because if you're thinking, "Oh, I don't, it could be one book, it could be two books, I don't know how big it's going to be," fine, start writing, do a chunk of it, and then think, "Okay, that's about half of what I was going to write about. Well, then how many words have you up to?" So don't be afraid to start in the middle if that just happens to be how it's flowing. I've certainly seen that with a number of our authors, where they've started at what they thought was the start, and then through early editing and through just letting us read a little bit of it, we've got curious with them and said, "So if this is this, then how do I get to that?" And they've gone, "Oh, well, you do this, this, this." We go, "You might want to write a chapter on that, because as me, as the consumer, I that's too big a jump." So, and this is where getting feedback early is really helpful as well, is to actually say, "Am I starting in the right place here, or am I making assumptions and using jargon that needs to either be explained or removed?" So, particularly with people doing anything that's technical. So, yeah, that's what I'd say is the next thing. You got to actually get in there and write it. Then you've got to decide how you're going to publish it, and then you've got to have the whole business plan around how you're going to promote it. Because if you're thinking, "Oh, I'll stick it up there on Amazon, that'd be fab," yeah, it will be. But there's 12 million Kindles on Amazon. How's yours going to stand out? And there's about 180,000 books published in the UK, about 275,000 books published in the UK on Amazon alone every year. So if you're thinking, "I'm going to do a book, I'll stick it out on Amazon, make loads of money," marvelous. But unless you're a member of the British royal family, that's probably not going to happen. You're going to have to actually have a proper promotion strategy to actually get it out there, the same as you would with any business. That's where I say that's where you start. So I could talk forever on this.
Yeah, no, absolutely right. You need to think about what you're going to do with it. But let me talk, let me just share, because some people here watching perhaps know this story and some won't. But if I just think about two of my books, just bear with me a second. So my first book took me forever to write. It was my first book. I had no idea what I was doing. I started it, if I remember right, in September 2010. It was published in May 2011. So perhaps not that bad, but it was 9 months. It felt like hard work. I kept picking up, putting it down, and it was a real struggle, the first one. But then I kind of started to figure out some shortcuts. And a few years later, I then wrote these two books and published them in the same month: A Practical Approach to Value Pricing and How to Build a Successful Bookkeeping Business. Now, I would never recommend doing two books in the same month. I don't know why I did it, what possessed me, but each of these two books took me a day to write. And the process that I went through was I spent for each of them, I sat down and spent the morning, the first 2 or 3 hours, planning what are the chapters going to be. I just brainstormed the titles for chapters. And then for each chapter, I thought to myself, okay, what are 3 points I need to teach in each chapter? And that was my structure. And then I'd learned beforehand, and you made the point earlier that when you write, you want to write not in jargon, but you want to write in plain English. And the best way to write is to write as you speak. And so what I then did is, having got my outline, I just got a recorder and I recorded as if I was doing a webinar in my particular case. But for an accountant, they could imagine them just talking to one of their clients and teaching go through that chapter. And for each chapter, I created an audio recording. And what I did is I'd worked out how many, again with the idea of starting with the end in mind, I worked out how many words do I want the book to be? And I think it was something like 10,000 words. I wanted to be enough to make it look impressive. So I had a word count in mind. 10,000 rings a bell. It might have been a bit more. And I then worked out what my words per minute speaking were. I just spoke for about 5 minutes, and then I worked out how many words that was once I transcribed it. And so I worked out, okay, if I want a 10,000 word book, I've got to speak for this number of minutes. And if I'm doing 10 chapters, divide that by 10, I have to do 10 lots of 10 minutes or something like that. And that's one of the things that it surprised me and surprised other people, that if you talk for 60 minutes, doing a webinar, for example, record it, transcribe it, that's a lot of content for a book. It doesn't take that long to speak a book. I'm guessing about 2 hours worth of content for each of these two books. And then what I did is, I didn't know you at the time, Sharon, but I wanted somebody to do the rest of the process and outsource it. And so I found people on LinkedIn who are editors, and I just said, here's the transcription, turn it into a finished book. And that was the end of the process for me. So each of these were a day of planning and recording.
And I think this is the thing to bear in mind as well, is that quite often people will say, I'm just going to, my friend's good at English, I'll get them to make sure all the full stops are in the right place. But it requires a bit more than that. You need to have somebody who's going to look at it and go, what did you intend with this book? And have you met it or not? And to actually put themselves in, if you like, in the space of your reader and say, okay, so the assumptions you've made are about this, or I'd like a couple of paragraphs more about that because I didn't quite understand that bit, or whatever. But to actually take that dispassionate look back and go, okay, what are you selling after this? And are there enough hooks in here? Am I picking up the right hooks that go, okay, so yeah, I get that from that, I really do need to speak to you. So having that thing already, and then having somebody to look at it from that perspective and go, okay, this is how we can make it work. And it's actually quite important.
Yeah, and that's where a good editor comes in.
Yeah.
And because some people self-publish and do the whole thing themselves, but that's a lot of work, and it's much better to get editors, as you just said, editors kind of will read it and put themselves in the mind of the customer and look for things that make sense or don't make sense. And in a similar way, you need to have somebody proofread it, because it's amazing how many spelling mistakes and typos that you miss when you try to read your own content. So you have to have a proofreader, you have to have an editor involved,
You have
and
to typeset it properly as well.
absolutely.
So if you're probably not thinking about typesetting at the moment, but when you put a manuscript out there, you've got to think, well, where's your chapter titles going to be, and where are the ends of the paragraphs going to be, and you've got to actually make sure that it looks right. So, for example, it's quite common if you write a novel to start the first page of a chapter halfway down the page, and to have the chapter title or the chapter number. So you've got to have a think about how's that going to look, and that takes a bit of doing to understand how to put it together properly, so that if you did self-publish and you put it up on a platform like Amazon, that it's actually going to accept it, and that if you actually print you get a early copy printed off for yourself, that you're not going to look at it and go, oh dear, that looks a bit rubbish and I don't know how to make it right. Which of course can happen.
Absolutely, yes. And I think you were, I mean, you'll probably come with this later, but when you were talking about what you do in the hybrid approach, I guess you and your team do all those bits the typesetting, the editing,
yeah.
Yeah.
That understanding of the business and what you're going to do with it next, and also the brainstorming of, okay, so you're now a small business person with a book. And so as a published author, what are you going to do? Are you a speaker type person? Do you want to get speaking gigs? If so, we need to start brainstorming where you're going to do that. Are you actually a bit shyer than that, but you're okay if you do it online? Are you, what is it that you're capable of? What is it you would enjoy doing that you can promote your book with? So we've got some of the people that we've helped to put books together have overcome life-threatening issues. One has stage 4 cancer, for example, and he's okay at the moment, has been for the last couple of years. He's written a book about a man's perspective on asking the right questions and living with cancer. And he's quite happy to get out there and talk to people about it. So we had to then think about, okay, so now you need a whole package of stuff to go with this. You're going to need some slides. You're going to need a banner. We're going to need a whole package of things here that for our designer to do for you, not just the book. And I would say the same thing goes with a business book, because if you've got a business book and it looks like this, then having a website that's yellow and black doesn't fit with your book. So you've got to think about it. This is a branding piece. And it may be an opportunity to rebrand your business along with the launch of your book. So have a think about that as well, about how's that all going to fit, and where on your website, because that's your shop front for a lot of people, where on your website and your social media is your book going to sit? So is it going to have its own page? Is it going to be integrated in a different way? Where's the interaction going to be, and how are people going to buy it? You've got to make it easy for people to buy it.
Sure, absolutely. You said something earlier. I meant to ask this earlier, but it went in my head and then went straight out again. When you were talking about, you've talked about Kindle and KDP, and you also talked about, and something that actually made me smile was, I remember the days when we had a room full of piles of books, lots and lots of books. So what's your thoughts and your advice on whether to go and create a physical book, or you could just go purely down the Kindle route?
Yeah, you could go purely down the Kindle route. I suppose it depends on what's in the book as to whether you, and dare I say, if you've used a bit of padding, as to whether you want to get it printed or not. One of the tactics in business books, if you think, I've got up to like 9,000 words, but I'd like it to look a bit bigger, is if you've got some thought-provoking things in there, you can always put a couple of pages with lines on and the words notes. So if you've got one of those with the words notes, and you're going to give people some space to actually explore, and follow through on what you've taught them in that chapter, then having a physical book's a good idea. but a Kindle can work just as well if you haven't got that sort of thing. So yeah, it just depends, and it depends on your audience. What is your audience like? If they're, dare I say, if they're over 40, they might want a physical book. If they're under 40, then maybe a Kindle or an Audible would be their sort of way of accessing that.
Yeah, great points. I mean, in my case, I went for physically producing them because they look more impressive if you do a webinar or you're on a stage and you brandish it rather than just describing it. I have this Kindle book, and showing a Kindle doesn't really have the same
No.
impact.
And also, it's easier. You can do both. It's not a big, once you've done it for one, actually sort of redoing it and jigging it and doing it for the other is not such a big deal. Kindle, yes, you just need a front page, fair enough.
Yeah.
Whereas obviously you need a front and a back page and a few other bits and pieces for a printed book. But actually, once you've gone to the effort, you know, you can do both. And as you say, on print on demand, you could just print off a few copies for yourself and to give away a bit and to go and book wave and whatever. But you could focus on just promoting your Kindle if that's what you believe that your people would really attach to.
Sure. When I did my first book back in 2010, it took me ages to write, and it wasn't that many words, the first version. So it was a paperback, and it was fairly thin. It was some good stuff in it. People loved it, and it did get to number 1 on Amazon across all business books. I remember knocking Lord Sugar off his perch, which was quite nice. And Who Moved My Cheese? I think it was the screenshot I've got. I think I was above Who Moved My Cheese, which is a great book. But after I did it, I was a little bit. It just when I got them printed, and it didn't have the gravitas. It didn't feel impressive, and so. About a year or so later, I then did the second edition of it, because I then realised that I really want a hardback book, and it wasn't enough to be a hardback book. And also because I could then, if I did a second edition, I could put on the front cover, I could put
the Amazon
bestseller, yes. And in the book, actually, is a screenshot of, if anyone doubts it, I've got a screenshot of the image from Amazon.
Bear in mind as well is your strategy around, if you're going to stick something out on Amazon, is your strategy around that. So you need a whole marketing idea around what you're going to do. And also the moment it goes live on there, particularly if even if you have just told all your friends and you're hoping that they'll all buy a copy, keep watching, because there's 2 charts to look at. One will be the chart for your category, and it'll show you, see if you get in the top 100. If so, then tell everybody, take some screenshots, stuff it out on social media, really go for it. The other one is hot new releases. So, for example, this one here, in her category, she was on hot new release for a month, number 1. So, it's anything that gives you that, this is worth seeing. It's that social proof. So, yeah, you've got to keep an eye on it, is what I would say.
Sure, yeah. And one of the things, so when I went from when I created the second edition of it, all I did is I realized I needed a few more words. So I just wrote, I wrote an introduction to the book that I felt was missing from the finished thing, and then a conclusion. So I basically created a chapter to the start, the chapter at the end, added that to it, and that was my second edition. But what I found interesting was that the cost of producing a hardback book isn't much more than a paperback book. I mean, people sometimes think you can buy a paperback for £5 and a hardback for 20, but that's not the reason. That's not the reason. The cost of producing it isn't much different. And so I would recommend to people that if your goal is, going back to that comment I've mentioned a few times, is that your book is the best business card you can ever have. If you want something to physically give to a brand new client because you want to impress them, whilst the content's the same, a hardback book just feels like it's got some more value when people touch it. They think, wow, that's got to be worth a lot. And so then the law of reciprocity kicks in, and when you give them something they feel is really valuable, they're more likely to reciprocate, which is hopefully they'll give you the business.
Indeed. So there's lots of different tactics on that, and again, it just depends on the type of book, the style of book, who it is it's going to be using it, whether they're actually going to be using it as a bit of a manual, in which case a paperback's probably what they expect, and it's probably fine. So yeah, but it's all of those things of understanding what that product's going to do.
Sure. Yeah. Now, I've just noticed that some questions are coming in now from Jean over in Canada. I think he's got 3 questions. The first one we might have possibly partly dealt with, but in a little, but let's see. He says, what about a PDF? I feel is easy to copy and give away to others without paying. What are your suggestions?
Easy to copy and give away to others without paying. So so if you've got a downloadable PDF as an ebook example on your website, then what I would say is you need to put a barrier in place. So they need to give you something. And if it's not money, it's got to be their details. So they've got to answer some stuff on there. They've got to give you their email address. They've got to give you, what do you hope to gain from this book or something. So what I would say is, have an ebook and make it a decision as to, do you just give a teaser bit of it and anybody can download that and you want everyone to download it and share it, but then for the more meaty stuff, they've got to give you something. So what are they going to give you? And if it's not money, it's data.
Absolutely. And I'd agree with that. Ebooks are really powerful. So Jean says, what about a PDF? A PDF is effectively an ebook. And it goes back to, what's your objectives? What's your goal? And if your goal is to collect email addresses and build your list, that's really powerful. I started off, before I introduced Susan, mentioning Sharon. Before I mentioned Sharon, I mentioned the fact that I've just written my latest ebook and you can get a free copy. And so I have lots of ebooks, because they are great from a marketing point of view. Definitely you want to think about that. In fact, if I go back to 2010, when I started writing my first book, Effective Pricing for Accountants, when I started writing that in September 2010, it was originally an ebook. And I have a copy of the ebook version of that, and it was a lead generator. But then, having started to write the ebook, I thought, you know what? Let's keep going. Let's go beyond that. And so you could. We both. Sharon mentioned the fact that you could do a second edition. You can add more content. You could start with an ebook, just to get something out there, and then build on it and say, okay, I could write some. I've written that.
And,
Let me do a.
It's a great way of engaging your audience, because you could write a fairly short ebook and say, well, this is, and then when anybody comes back to you and says that was a great because, or you can start having more of a dialogue. So they've had to give you their details to get the thing, and you can then go back and say, what else would you like for me to cover? And then see what the popular stuff comes back as, and there's ebook number 2, or you add it to the original one and turn it into a published book. So it gives you that start of a conversation, which is what we're trying to do with these books, isn't it, at the end of the day?
Absolutely. Yeah. Okay, Sharon, we've got some more questions coming in. I have a final question for you as well, and I also want you to share in a little while how people can reach out to you. But John says as well, what about audio, like Audible? Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I suppose it depends on what it is your book does, because if it's got lots of tables in it, that's not going to translate very well on Audible. But if it's a book about how a more theoretical book around how you do how you put your proposition together, or whatever it is you do, then yeah, absolutely. And they're getting very, very popular now. So there's more and more podcasts out there, and in fact, it does give you, if you've got a whole genre of people who are really into that, then of course you can do teasers of that on a podcast and actually put podcasts out. And in fact, podcasts are really great for getting your book out there as well, getting on other people's podcasts, getting your putting out some of your little bits of content on your podcast, followed by a big buy my book. So get a bit creative on that. But yeah, I'd say definitely Audible is getting more and more popular, and with people going back to commuting a bit more now as well, they want to stick something in their ears and perhaps do a bit of continual professional development on their way into the office. So yeah.
Yep, that's a great point. Because Jean's next question is, what is the best way to market a book? And
it's funny actually, because my next book is going to be 50 ways to promote your book, because having sat down and thought, I've seen people do it like this, I've seen it done like that, we've done it like this, we've done it like that. And bearing in mind, most of our books that come through our publishing company end up as Amazon bestsellers. Like, well, actually, yeah, how's best to promote your book? Well, you've got the first thing you've got to do is find where your audience is sitting and what are their habits. So what do they do? But you've got to think about how are you going to reach out on social media? That's one thing. How are you going to market physical books if you've got a physical book? How are you going to physically do that is another thing. So there's lots of different avenues from say I've got 50 of these, but there's from going on to podcasts, going out at speaking at networking events. Are you going to have a mailing list and send some stuff out? Are you going to? There's just you could wrap it. You could wrap your book up and leave it on some park benches with some lovely, for International Day of Friendship, International Day of Happiness, International Accountancy Day, whatever. And then social media that you've left these in various places and encourage people in there to put stuff, a picture of themselves in the book and a thank you on social media with your hashtag. There's all sorts of things that you can do, but you've got to think about how you're going to promote that book and have some fun with it, because you can, after the initial whoa, I've got a book, which normally goes to that. So that be prepared as well for the slight dip before the book comes out, which is everyone's going to see it and they're all going to hate it. Every author thinks that. Every single one has a little bit of a moment. That's perfectly normal. That means you're an author. And if you go to the stage where you hate your book, that means you're definitely an author. If you've done your 50,000 words, you're struggling for the last 5,000, you feel like you've lost the plot, you're definitely an author at that point. So many people go through those phases. But yeah, the promotion of it, if you don't love your book, no one else will. So if you're bored with it, everyone else will be bored with it. And you've got to think about how you're going to keep putting. Are you going to have little Canva pictures with one of your tips on? How are you going to get it out there? And think about what works on Instagram, what works on TikTok. Look at the hashtags on TikTok. There's an interesting one. Think about how you're going to promote it on LinkedIn if it's a business book. So think about those channels. Think about where people are.
Okay, I need your copy of your next book then. That's going to be really powerful. Sharon, I've got one. I think it's a quick question here from my friend Jim in Exeter, and then I'm going to ask how people can find out more. Jim says, will colour printing be much more expensive? I teach accountants how to effectively communicate with data visualization, so the charts need to be printed in full colour.
Yeah, so it does add to the price of the book. It has to be said. I mean, it depends on how much colour and how many charts and all the rest of it. Remember, charts add to the price of a book as well, because you've got to get them actually created properly and typeset them in, and it takes longer. So does colour? Yes, colour does. It does put the price of your book up. Definitely.
Okay, thank you for that. We've got 5 minutes left, so we might have time for one or two more questions, possibly. But I must ask this question, which is, how can people find out more? And I know that Sarah's going to be posting some links, I think, into the comments box. So you might want to mention those, Sharon.
Yeah, so our website is discoveryourbounce.com, and we're also discoveryourbouncepublishing.com. Both of those will take you to our website, and you'll see there that we've got all of our businesses are in the same place. But yes, we got our publishing things on there. So we've got aspiring author to best-selling books. So we've done a quick and easy course, which we're launching soon as well, for people who are thinking, I don't know where to start. Well, I'm getting all excited, but I still don't know where to start. So we've got that coming out soon, and so you'll be able to see that on our website. We've also got, if you've got a book and you think, yeah, well, I did this and it didn't really do anything for me and it needs a bit of TLC, we've got a relaunch your book strategy. So we can also do that, because this is the other thing, just because you did it once doesn't mean to say you can't do it again. So get a decent cover on it, and that's something I would say as well as a good tip, is to get a cover professionally produced. Because when things go out on Amazon or things like that, that's where they really see people will skim down, and you need something that's going to stand out and is really going to be the striking thing. So say a bit like Bernie's book. why it did so well. Partly the colour, partly the design, absolute. So you've got to think about what's going to stand out. So yeah, that's what I would say.
Great.
In fact,
Hamant says repeat the
repeat the website.
website. Although actually, I've just noticed that Sarah has now actually, I think, put it into the comments box, at least in YouTube. But YouTube.
It's discoveryourbounce.com, and you can also find me on LinkedIn.
Great. Yep. Sarah's posted it as a bit.ly link, but it should take you to the same place. And I can see that Sarah's posting it in Facebook right now. So it should be there. It should be there in the comments box before we finish. We've pretty much out of time. Let me just wrap up with one quick question, and that's what would be your number one top tip for getting the book noticed?
Well, I think I've kind of given the game away a bit on that one. I would say definitely the cover, because with so many books hitting the marketplace out there, people scroll. That's what we do these days. So you've got to have something that makes people go, "Oh, yeah, I like that." So yeah, you've got to get a professionally get a professionally produced cover, and make sure that it says something that that works, if you like, for what you're trying to sell. So the title. So double check your title as well, because it can be very easy to accidentally have somebody else's title, and then you're in a land of confusion. So, so check the title, and make sure that that is a unique title to you, and yeah, get a professional cover.
Great. I'll do one more quick question, but I do notice that some people said that link doesn't work. I'm sure Sarah's noticed, but the long link, discoveryourbounce.com, should work. That will work. It could be the bit.ly link. We'll test it. Anyway, very quick last question, and then I need to wrap up and help about tomorrow. Linda Rolfe from Florida says, is there a best colour?
Depends on what you're trying to do. So the psychology of colour, I could talk about forever. Business books tend to be blue or black. Blue is a very trustworthy colour. Yellow colours are, and striking yellow, yeah, exactly. Yellows and oranges tend to attract attention. So if you're looking at branding and brand stuff generally, then they give a very warm, if you like, aspect. So it just depends on what you're trying to sell. But as a business book, I'd say start with blue, different colours, different types of blues. And say if you can go pale blue if it's a more light-hearted, fun one. You can go navy blue if it's a slightly more serious book that you're writing.
Okay, interesting. All my other ones have got the brand colour, which is orangey
The
yellow.
brown colour, yeah. So you've got.
I'm glad you've said all of that.
Yellow is very interesting, actually, because yellow it is seen. It is something that stands out on when people are scrolling through. It is something that stands out really easily. Yeah.
Great. Okay, we are pretty much out of time. Sharon, that's been amazing. I've learned so much as well, and I definitely want to get a copy of your latest book when it comes out. Thank you so much for coming on. I'm just going to announce in a second what's happening tomorrow. I have another live stream tomorrow, but let me just finish by saying thank you so much, Sharon.
You. No, thank you for having me on your show. Thank you.
It's been great fun. Okay, I didn't mean to press that button. Right. So we're out of time pretty much. Just let me tell you about tomorrow's event, but also please put in the comments box what's the best thing? What's the best tip you've learned today? Because then I'm sure Sharon will want to see the feedback. What's the best thing that you've learned? And secondly, if you've had some value from this, please click the thumbs up button or the like button wherever you are on social media. That would be much appreciated. So what was the best thing that you've learned today? Put that in the comments box. And then tomorrow, I have another live stream tomorrow. That's with the wonderful Margie Remmers. Now, just so you know, it's really only for you if you are a QBO user. She's going to be talking about the QuickBooks Pro Advisor program. And it's largely relevant to the US, but if you're not in the US, you'll probably still learn some great stuff. That's tomorrow, same time as usual. We'll be talking about QuickBooks Pro Advisor program, how to qualify and the benefits of it and everything QuickBooks with Margie. That's tomorrow. Okay, thank you for coming along to today's session. I might see you tomorrow, and I'm going to play out with some music as normal, give me a chance just to see any final comments that have come through. Speak to you soon. Have a great day. Bye for now.
my time, I wasted all my nights, I wasted it on someone who's indifferent. He didn't love me right, he told me I was blind, but I never really wanted to listen.